Do we have a song that we could sing together? That everyone would know?
I mean, that's a lesson I've learned, that it's very important, man. The more love you give unconditionally, the better person you are, the bigger your heart is, and the world needs more people like that.
The biggest act of love he can give to anybody, and that was forgiveness. So that was one of the moments where love evolved.
I had to be conscientious of the moment. You all bring so much balance to us. I think we developed a genuine friendship, a sister and brotherhood.
As you get older and come to understand what love is and what home is, it's in people. Y'all became my home.
I'm so grateful to even have this experience with y'all. To know that by y'all allowing yourself to shine, y'all gave me permission to shine as well.
I feel in this room that I know nothing about love. If I'm honest, listening to all of you, I really feel young.
On my birthday, I'm gonna go to an ocean somewhere on this planet, and I'm gonna sing the song that kept me strong and standing by a cell door for all these years. And so today I want to sing this song for you, mama. Unto the old Lord do I lift up my soul. Unto the old Lord do I lift up my soul. Oh my God, I trust in thee. Let me not be afraid. Let not my enemies triumph over me. I'm here, mama. I'm here, mama. I made it.
I want to talk about the differences in love with the love for my brothers. So, my middle brother died. He was killed when he was 17, and I was 9 years old. And so, for me, the way to express my love was to get revenge. The dude who did that to my brother, I'm coming for whoever was part of that gang, right? And there was no stopping me. And this is 9 years old. This is my idea of what expressing love was. And living that lifestyle, I just saw that it was getting me nowhere. It's like I had that I didn't think I was gonna make it past 18, but then something started clicking, and I'm seeing like, man, my aggression, the lifestyle I'm living, it's not doing that for me. Sacrifices, all this stuff, it's not getting anywhere, not bringing my brother back. There's just so much disunity.
Benny Rios would go on to describe the way his definition of love has evolved over his 24 years of incarceration. But no one is interested to learn of his loyalty or the evolution of his love. This conversation was recorded inside of Stateville Maximum Security Prison in the summer of 2024. Benny was in conversation with me and other men who will be killed by incarceration under Illinois' current legislation. This next clip is of Robert John, who was sentenced to life plus 4 years when he was 19 years old. He has served 26 years of his sentence and is ineligible for release.
So when I was listening to the two quotes that you read, memories came back to my mind, and Joe knows exactly what I'm talking about. So when I was in Tams, Supermax Prison, it was built literally in the middle of the Shawnee National Forest, you know, surrounded by nature and beauty, but we couldn't see it because we were isolated, you know, behind walls and behind doors. And so our yard was like a 15 by 30 foot concrete box with 20-foot high walls and sheet metal and chain link fence covering the roof. And so every so often it would rain and these tree frogs would fall into the yard and they would get trapped in there and they couldn't get out. And a lot of guys, they were afraid to touch them, you know, because we never seen tree frogs before, you know. But there's little drains like this big with perforated holes at the bottom of the yard. And so they would crawl into the drain and they would just stay there until they would dry up and die. And so I would go out onto the yard and I would try to throw them up through the holes of the chain link fence. And they would always get scared and spread their arms out, and so they would hit the fence and fall back down. And, you know, to me, you know, you talk about blind hungering, when you're in a place like that, you know, you hunger just for normalcy or connection with anything, right? And just touching an animal, you know, like the beauty of touching an animal, let alone another human being, right? To me, like that's beautiful, like the life that existed there, right? And that prison was out of place. Like that prison and everybody in it was a stranger in that forest. Like we didn't belong there. We didn't have no right to have that prison there or to be in it. And these frogs would fall in here and die, which that would have never happened if the prison wasn't even there, right? And so I kind of felt like a frog, you know, just trapped there waiting to die. And so I was so desperate to get this frog through the fence that what I did was I went back into my cell and I ripped my sheet up and I made a real long line. And I tied a little weight to it. And I threw it up through the chain link fence. And it lowered it down until I could see it through the perforated holes of the drain at the floor. And then I got an ink pen and I put a staple on it and I reached through the perforated hole and I pulled the line through. And so I got the line here and then I got the line going over the wall. So then I connected a tissue roll to the end of the line and I folded one end up and I put the frog in it. And I pulled the line through the drain and lifted him up to the top of the fence. So that way he could get and he could climb up and he could just go, you know. And I was telling somebody that was there what I was doing. And he was like, man, why are you touching them nasty ass frogs, man? You're gonna get warts and all, you know. We didn't know, you know what I mean? But I was like, man, I can't just let the frog die there, you know, because like that's like I'm looking at the frog like it's me, you know. And I feel like this system that builds places like that and that harms people, it harms nature, it harms the world, the harmony of the world. And I feel like those are the strangers that are responsible for building these places and putting people in them are the ones for me that need to be cleared in order for me to find peace in my space. You know, because as long as they're around, I'll never feel peace. You know, so that's just the memory that was coming to my mind when I was listening to the quotes.
Melissa introduced me to this work 2.5 years ago by inviting me to correspond via telephone with one of the incarcerated men who had shown a profound interest in exploring avenues not only to share his experience of being incarcerated, but also to express that he did not simply serve time. He used it to define who he is today and who he is becoming. I was shocked to learn he was serving a life sentence for a crime he took the blame for due to loyalty to gang code. He is currently 30 years into his sentence, and at 56 years old, he is a college graduate, author, lecturer, poet, and an artist. Our conversations have culminated in a growing series of 8 episodes titled Afrofuturism Imagined. The solo cast series features 20-minute monologues where his words stand as a testament to the power of intellectual resilience and hope. From within the confines of his space, he articulates a future rooted in radical love, collective healing, and revolutionary change. A future where transformation is not only possible, but essential. What astounds me is that the system, which is often not designed to rehabilitate, has not deterred him. Despite being incarcerated for 30 years, he has cultivated himself as a scholar, one who envisions a better future through deep compassion and humanity. How can we let that growth go unnoticed? In a punitive system, where do we make space for those who are actively doing the work of transformation? Through his poetry, lectures, artwork, and relentless thirst for learning, he has carved pathways toward his own rehabilitation. A quick Google search of his name reveals pages upon pages of his work, covering Afrofuturism, abolition, restorative justice, and Black feminism, spanning his poetry, art, and activism. So I come into this conversation with a fundamental question. How do we continue to punish individuals who are actively working to transform themselves and contribute positively to society?
This program exists to allow you to know what we know from being in community with the humans that the state, and therefore we, the people, will execute slowly by incarceration.
I had a little bit of a rough time growing up. I'm Mexican American, first generation. For many native Mexicans, I wasn't Mexican enough. The white world, I was growing up, for them, I wasn't American at all. And I grew up in a mostly white suburb, went to a mostly white high school. Kids made fun of me wearing, that when you little, wear them cheap Pro Wings to school. So I kicked a little ass in school. I found out that street gangs granted asylum to misfits like me. So at an early age, I got mixed up in gangs, in drugs, in fighting. Then at the age of 15, I did something really stupid. It was December 1993. My father was in prison. My brother just had a baby, so he moved in with his girl. And I thought I had to be the man of the house. And I was in our living room watching TV. And some commercials were coming on. As Christmas was approaching, they were making suggestions of gifts you could buy for your family. And I thought to myself, who's gonna bring Christmas home to my family this year? And I've always been extremely ashamed to admit this. Out of desperation, I stuck up a gas station to buy Christmas gifts for my family. Two weeks later, I was arrested. A month after that, I was sentenced as an adult to 6 years in prison. But those 6 years were just the beginning of my punishment. As soon as I got to the juvenile lockup, the guards made us fight each other. They'd pick a black kid and a Latino and make us fight. They exploited racial tensions. It was like pitting a tiger against a lion. to satisfy some sadistic curiosity as to which one was the more dominant species. And I was placed in solitary confinement well over a dozen times, for weeks and months at a time. At some point, the administration had the bright idea to create a special housing unit. So they grabbed about 30 or 40 of the worst kids and put us on E-wing. Everyone called it the bad boy wing. We were in the cells by ourselves, extreme isolation, no radio, no TV. We barely even had any cosmetics to wash up with, and we hardly ever saw each other, but we were so fucked up that if we did see each other, we would try to gouge each other's eyes out. I had 6 years, and I could have came home in just under 3 for good behavior. There was no goddamn good behavior to be found there. So at age 19, they opened the door, they released me. Good luck, kid. I stayed out in society 2.5 months with my family. 2.5 months before I was rearrested, convicted, and sentenced to 2 life sentences, each without the possibility of parole, and for good measure, another 30 years on top of that. And I wonder, what did society expect of me? What do any of you expect of a 15-year-old who's locked in a cage in extreme isolation, and for 4 years, his life is devalued every single day? What options remain for me? Could I have came home and went to college? Could I then went off to law school? Could I really have learned to litigate in courtrooms instead of appearing in them as a criminal defendant? We'll take a good guess as to which of the two happened.
Raul Dorado, the man whose story you just heard, was central to restoring my faith in humans. Poet and essayist David White says that honesty is grounded in humility, and indeed in humiliation, and in admitting exactly where we are powerless. On September 9th, 2017, I survived abduction and predatory sexual assault. I got into a car that I mistakenly believed was my Uber and was not released for 4 hours. My world collapsed. My assailant was never caught. I dissociated from my body and was diagnosed with PTSD. I was rendered useless to my own theater company. The feeling was that of having learned a lesson. I was offered extensive movement therapy from friends and colleagues in Serbia. And I returned with the feeling that I might be the only survivor in the world who had ever received such care. I was inspired to pay this care forward, but found that I was now harboring a new, paralyzing fear of men. I couldn't afford to be held hostage by this experience, and I felt that my ultimate healing now required drawing closer to this fear. I also knew that no one was caring for the trauma in the bodies of those we have incarcerated. So to participate in that healing and to face my fear, I began offering movement therapy for trauma rehabilitation at Cook County Jail and Stateville Correctional Center in 2018. This work immediately inverted my narrative. these institutions were also a crime. These extraordinary condemned men had the power to restore my faith in my fellow humans. I was encouraged to share the harm that had brought me behind these 30-foot walls. And when I did, Raul, the man you just met, raged on behalf of his mother, his sister, his niece. I never imagined that I needed this validation from anyone, but especially from them. I carried and continued to struggle to release so much shame for not having taken better precautions in the world, for being so naive and so careless. Their love and care was a shock, and my need of it was evidence that banishment harms, freezes, paralyzes everyone. Responsible parties are traumatizing others out of their own complex traumas. There is no healing for any of us until there is healing for all of us. We needed each other to heal. We needed to see one another, to confess and cry together, and to remember that I am because of who we all are. When we banish those who have committed a crime from the world on behalf of the harmed party, we serve no one. Incarceration leaves a new trail of victims in its wake. More traumatized humans suffering between more bad choices, to say nothing of the harm done to the wrongfully incarcerated, or the cruelty of long-term sentences without the possibility of parole. What good is justice without the possibility of change? I personally do not feel safe inside a system that locks people up and throws away the key. Proximity, interdependence, and mercy have become my oxygen and my freedom as the world has become more frightening and complex. There is no healing for any of us until there is healing for all of us. Until all of us are whole, none of us are safe.
We practice permanent banishment in this state. Raul was sentenced to 2 life sentences, plus 30 years, for accountability. In other words, responsibility for murder committed by fellow gang members. It doesn't matter how many degrees Raul receives during that lifetime, or whether he never has any disciplinary issues. We will never reconsider his rehabilitation or capacity for growth. He is one of 5,600 people in Illinois who will be killed by incarceration, no matter what they do with their time. You will struggle to believe that there's no parole in Illinois because we use the word for other things. We say a person is out on parole to describe the 3 years of supervision a returning citizen faces upon release. They are assigned a parole officer during those 3 years. But parole is when an individual is evaluated prior to the end of their sentence to assess their rehabilitation and the need for further incarceration. Red received parole in Shawshank Redemption. He was released prior to the end of his sentence. This is what Illinois got rid of in 1978, along with 17 other states over the years.
We don't have parole in Illinois. It ended in 1978. And only people convicted before 1978 essentially still come up for parole before a parole board. Yeah, about 100 years ago in this country, there were a group of people who decided like prisons had to do more than just punish and warehouse folks. That if you're going to go away for a little while, you should come back better. And rehabilitation was a big part of that. So rather than a judge deciding a trial like that person should get 10 years or 5 years or 15 years or 50, how about after a little while, the sentenced person, the person in prison meets with a group of people who can assess them. And that's parole. That would be a parole board. it makes sense. It's like common sense in a lot of ways, so much so that it became the law of the land. And every state adopted a parole system eventually in the federal government. And then by about the second half of the last century, in the 1960s and 1970s, people in prison were like, this is not working. There's so many reasons why parole failed. One is that prisons do a really bad job at rehabilitation, that they're punitive and that they're criminogenic. They create more crime rather than create the circumstances for people to reform. And also the parole board members were often political appointees, so there were a lot of prejudices that were also, it was harder to connect with somebody who was different. And so people in prison and their supporters didn't want parole. Conservatives didn't want parole because they didn't like any system of release. And then so really parole was doomed by the middle of the 1970s and beyond. One of the ironies of this is that what replaced parole, which these sort of indeterminate sentences, we replaced them with these fixed sentences where you would get a mandatory minimum amount of time. Those mandatory minimums just got longer and longer and longer. They were essentially in the hands of politicians who were always afraid of being accused of being soft on crime. Longer prison sentences, fewer options for release. And the third thing we did is we made it much more likely that somebody who commits an offense is going to serve prison time rather than some other form of punishment. That becomes the recipe for mass incarceration. We go in Illinois, from about 5,000 people in prison, 5,600 or so in the 1970s, to 49,000. It's an incredible amount. Every state does this. Whether you're Maine, whether you're New Mexico, California, Idaho, every state goes up with these percentages, as does the whole system overall. We go from about 200,000 in the country in prison, in every federal and state prison, to about 1.6 million. And where we are now, then, is that people in prison, including many of the men that you worked with, they want parole back. They want an option to just be assessed and seen by a parole board, and hoping to make the system better than the first time around.
Article 1, Section 11 of the Illinois Constitution, Limitation of Penalties After Conviction, mandates that all criminal penalties be determined based on both the seriousness of the offense and the objective of restoring the offender to useful citizenship. Death by incarceration denies any chance of restoration to useful citizenship.
We only had 107 people on death row when we abolished the death penalty in Illinois. Today, despite the feeling that we have become a more merciful and humane society, we have found cause to execute 5,600 people slowly by incarceration in Illinois, being sure to wring every last drop of free labor from them first.
The 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution formally abolished slavery and involuntary servitude throughout the United States, except as a punishment for a convicted crime.
This is the extent of America's dedication to racism and free labor. What is the call to action? Simply ask your lawmaker to visit a prison. It will be enough.
Life sentences and giving people 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, it's come to seem normalized. And we need to shake people up and feel that it's not. We're not supposed to really think about these distant places. It's really a kind of black box. You put in people and then you don't think about what happens there, and you don't think about even what comes out of them. I wish more people really confronted this idea that what we do in this country isn't normal. That we've created a system that is an aberration in terms of our own history, that these last 50 years of mass incarceration have no precedent in our own history and are an aberration compared to the rest of the world.
Bye.